You're listening to the Unwritable Rant podcast with your host and bourbon-soaked storyteller, Juliette Miranda.
Hey there, y'all. It's Juliette Miranda. Welcome to episode 257 of the Unwritable Rant podcast. I have a bourbon-soaked story for you today about Pagan mumbo jumbo and a very questionable figure. But first, it's bourbon time. Cheers, y'all. Whew. Y'all. I have to apologize for the tardiness of this episode. It's been a couple of crazy days, y'all. And I know I say that every week, but nothing in New Orleans is fucking easy. They've decided to replace our intercom system in this house, which pretty much took out the electricity and our internet for a couple of days. So I apologize if this episode is a little bit delayed, but we're here now. The unfortunate thing in all of this commotion is that it has brought out one of the most terrifying life forms on this planet. And that would be the flying cockroach. Holy balls, y'all. I had no idea this was a thing. I mean, I know we have cockroaches in New Orleans. I'm guessing there are more roaches in the French Quarter than there are people, and that includes tourists too. And I was cool with that. I mean, at least as cool as one can be, knowing that writhing around in every dark corner is a gang of dirty thugs in bright pink shells. And they don't exactly keep to themselves. When they're not staging knife fights with the rats, they're scurrying up and down the sides of buildings and popping out of garbage cans. Now, we're fortunate in that we do have an exterminator that comes every month. So for the most part, the inside of our home is reasonably protected. I just didn't expect the fuckers to launch a counterattack from above. So we've had all of these people tearing open walls and putting shit in and fucking around with the wiring, and apparently that disturbed the little peace ratio that we had going with the cockroaches. So my guy and I are minding our own business, just hanging out in our living room like normal people, when I hear this scratching sound. It's kind of like Freddy Krueger knives on brick scratching. And when I look up, I see that there is a cockroach making its way up the brick wall of our living room. I point it out to my guy, and the thing literally stops in its tracks when he turns to look at it. Like it knew we were watching. I figured that the thing would just, pop into some crack in the bricks and vanish. But oh no. This fucker propels itself off of the side of the bricks and fucking flies over to us. And while it does, it sounds like a goddamn helicopter, and it looks like a pterodactyl. And there was only one thing for my guy and I to do. Yeah, we ran shrieking out of the house like a couple of schoolgirls. Oh, it was so terrifying. It really was. And now I can't even walk into any room, not the bathroom, not the bedroom, before scanning every corner of every inch of the house to see if there happens to be a cockroach hanging out there. And I have to laugh when I think about just how stupid it is to be afraid of something that I can easily murder without any crisis of conscience. I mean, really, this is just a bug. A gross, erratic, and exceedingly large one, but still, it's just a bug. There are far more scary things in this world. Things that lack clear explanation and are far more challenging to eliminate. And unfortunately, I've encountered them. You see, my mother, the Wiccan priestess, believes that psychic and ghostly activity are at their height during the spring and summer, not Halloween. Her unconventional theory is kind of complicated, and it involves the sun and how heightened energy affects what she calls the veil between the spirit world and the natural one. It was always to her great dismay how much I love the summer. And had you asked me as a little kid about why that was, I would have said something about freedom and sunny days, but to my mother, that was kind of an ominous impulse. I was probably the only kid in the history of the universe who had to beg to go out on Midsummer Eve. My friends would all be running wild in the streets on the longest day of the year, and I'd have to stare down at them from my bedroom window, feeling like every bit the freakish loser. My mother never did adequately explain why she didn't want me outside that night, so the minute I was old enough to put up a fight, I didn't hesitate. I mean, it's the longest night of the year. I was nearly 18. There was no reason for me to not go out. But my mom just kept saying, "You don't understand. Everything runs hot tonight. Tempers, feelings, spirits. Your decisions will be clouded." Yeah, that was the typical argument every parent gives their teenagers, just wrapped up in a ball of pagan mumbo jumbo. A hot night of bad decisions was exactly what I was after. Not that I said as much. No, to my mother, I promised me and my girlfriend would be smart and careful, which was the second lie I told her that night. The first was where I planned on going. I waved as I backed our family Jeep out of the driveway, and my mother was resigned to trusting me, but she just looks grim as she watches me drive down the block and turn right. And as soon as the car is out of her watch, I double back to go where I really intended. A large midsummer night's eve carnival just a few towns over. Now let me be clear, it wasn't the carnival itself that my mother objected to. It was the location of it. Back in the early 70s, that land had been the site of a huge indoor amusement park and mall. That place was doomed from the start. Everything was over budget and consequently half-assed. So what should have looked like a World's Fair more resembled a Mall of the Damned. When it opened, the giant structure housed a few hinky rides, including a double-loop roller coaster, which turned out to be a faulty structure prone to uncomfortable malfunctions and accidents. There was also a beer garden, a food court, and a bunch of sketchy off-brand stores that occasionally and inexplicably caught fire. No local or tourist wanted to spend the day in a poorly lit concrete park of doom, not when the shiny and new Six Flags Great America was less than an hour away. So the park kind of limps along for a few years, and every so often it would host acts or concerts to attract the locals and hopefully stop the money from hemorrhaging. One weekend, a famous trapeze act was booked. And here's the fun part of this. They were convinced to perform for the first time ever without a net. Really, y'all, the owners and the act should have known better. I mean, come on. Performing a trapeze act without a net, that's insane. But it was the wacky 70s, which was a time ripe with daredevils and risk. And you know what they say about money talking. It's just too bad it couldn't fly. Now, I wasn't there to see the performance, but in a weird overlapping of worlds, my guy was. He was just a kid, and he was there at this amusement park with his mom, but he can still remember watching the performer just miss catching the bar, and the sound his body made when landing face up on the unforgiving concrete floor. At first, the audience thought it was part of the act, but the swell of applause quickly ended when the guy never got up. The amusement park quietly closed not long after that. The building was gutted and it stood empty for a very long time. Now, occasionally the city would propose turning the structure into something useful or profitable, like, a casino or an outlet mall. Somehow, the plans always fell through at the last minute, and the entire place was eventually razed to the ground. By the late 80s, all that was left was a huge expanse of empty concrete. Well, that and stories. Ask my mother, and she'd tell you that the land was cursed long before the amusement park was ever built. You see, it was the land of the Potawatomi tribe, the people of the place of fire, as my mother tells it, and the land was never meant to be used for commercial purposes. Now, ask the community, and they'd tell you that, well, maybe the land's haunted. Sure, some things had been seen there. Maybe a few bodies had been found there, but that's not worth fussing over. Really, the town just wanted to be done with this eyesore. To hell with the rumors and legends. And that was why they decided to host a carnival there one midsummer weekend. It really was the perfect location for a carnival. Endlessly flat and right off the highway in the industrial part of town. And it was a quick and easy way for the city to make a bit of money off their albatross. Oh, but when those advertisements came out, my mother was pissed. She believed that land should be cultivated for a forest preserve, or even a park, not some tacky show of lights and machinery. Respect the earth, that's what she said. Not that she was in any position of authority. We didn't live in that town, so her letters to the city and newspaper were easily dismissed, as was her insistence that I swear to never, ever go there. Please, Mom. A summer carnival offers far too much promise for a teenager to pass up. My partner in mischief that night would be my girlfriend, Daisy. My mother really only liked two of my girlfriends, Texas, because she assumed she could keep me physically out of trouble, and Daisy, because she figured she could keep me out of spiritual danger. My mother just related to Daisy, and I think that was because Daisy was a baby witch of sorts. Just a very dreamy girl who believed Jim Morrison was a poet and always had a handful of healing crystals in her pocket. Knowing I would be with Daisy was probably the only reason my mother relented to my going out at all. But, unbeknownst to her, Daisy had her own questionable compulsion to visit what she considered to be a spirit-filled gold mine. The two of us met at the carnival gates, brimming with anticipation over our plan for the night. Me to catch some boys, and her to hunt down some ghosts. We just couldn't agree on which to look for first. Barely 2 steps onto the ground, and we were engaged in an idiotic tug-of-war. Me toward the concert stage and Daisy toward the unlit area behind the carny trailers. Of course, I won. Because seriously, Daisy, they're dead. The ghosts aren't going anywhere. But the good guys would all be snagged by the end of the night if we didn't move in now. It was crazy girl logic that Daisy couldn't deny. So the two of us slathered on more lip gloss and made a lap around the grounds. Between the lights on the rides and the sun still being high overhead, the carnival was unusually bright for 8 o'clock that night, which was not to the credit of the crowd or carnival. Both looked more rough and unwashed than was reasonable. Broken glass, bullet shells, and condoms are mixed in with the usual assortment of crumpled ticket stubs and napkins in the gravel. Even the crowd at the kiddie games had this crazy fight or fuck look, which made me wonder just what kind of insanity could break out over a contested skee-ball game. And in the back of my head, over and over, I could hear my mother issuing her gloomy warning about this place. Bad energy attracts bad elements. Even Daisy, an eternal optimist, clutches my arm and she says, "I'm getting some seriously fucked up vibes here." They were both right. This was not the good time family fun fest I had expected. And had I not been on a mission to satisfy my raging hormones, I would have had the sense to walk us right back out into the parking lot. But God damn it, I wasn't going to let my mother and her ghost energy predictions ruin our fun. So I plaster a smile on my face, insist everything is totally fine, and guide us over to the concert stage. Music is just what we needed to improve the energy and our chances of finding some cute guys to play with. And if the concert grounds look a little disturbed, I say nothing as I lead us to some patchy grass near the sound booth. Our usual concert stance is to look available but uninterested. And that had worked wonders for us at Bon Jovi and Motley Crue, but it becomes rapidly apparent that it's not going to work at this place, at all, on any level. You have to understand the scene that we'd walked into. Most concerts are preceded by excited anticipation and activity. It's all lively and joyful. But this crowd seemed a little more like uncaged animals. And Lord, did we stand out. Our tiny white t-shirts and Daisy Duke shorts look obscene in what is quickly becoming a sea of black and chains and dog collars. And I gotta wonder just what the hell kind of band we're about to see. I check the banner above the drum kit, and I'm hoping it's going to be a band name that I vaguely recognize. But it's not. They're called Dead Man's Hand, which is kind of a scary name for a band playing a family festival. And to be sure, the four guys who walk on stage do not look like the sort to play Journey covers. A wall of violent distortion rips through the crowd when they kick in, and between the feedback and yelling, I realize that Dead Man's Hand is a Motorhead tribute band. Who the fuck hires a Motorhead tribute band to play anything? And don't get me wrong, I have nothing against Motorhead. And maybe, had the crowd been a little less snarly, Daisy and I could have braved it out for a couple of songs. But neither of us really knew what to do with that music. I mean, the most metal thing that I listened to back then was Bark at the Moon era Ozzy, which doesn't exactly match the intensity of four angry locals channeling Lemmy. This was pure noise and unrestrained chaos. And the second a bottle of beer goes whizzing past my head, I know it is not safe for us there. We have to leave, like, immediately. But it wasn't as easy as all that. The open area had filled up once the band started, and leaving meant snaking our way out of a thick, unorganized crowd of riled up dudes. Daisy pushes her way through the crowd first, and I follow. Brushing so close to these guys, I can taste the beer that they'd been swilling all day. These guys are hot and sweaty and hard, which is not nearly as fun as my romance novels would have led me to believe. Daisy makes it to the edge of the crowd first, and I'm very nearly there when one random guy decides to take advantage of his proximity by grabbing my ass. Sadly, ass grabbing was a common occurrence in crowd dodging at concerts. Usually it was opportunistic and quick, and the guy would blend back into the crowd before a gal could turn around to confront him. This dickweed was bold, and instead of a quick pinch, he slid his hand under the cuff of my shorts to take a handful of bare ass. Common sense would say that despite how gross that was, I probably should just let it go. Daisy and I were dramatically outnumbered, and really, what was I gonna do? Go whining to security that some bad man touched my butt without permission? Fuck that. I was a teenager who had deceived my parents to risk attending what turned out to be the worst fucking carnival in the history of ever, and the only thing I had to show for it was a sticky handprint. I wanted vengeance. I whirl around and find a group of guys looking far too pleased with themselves. Despite the beers in their hands, they have the look of 5-year seniors, and I figure I can handle these guys. And why I thought that is beyond me. I'm not a fighter. Hell, I can't even figure out the proper way to make a fist. But I can kick. And that is exactly what I did. I plant my foot in the first set of balls that I see, and I put that guy on the fucking ground. I think I made my point, so I turned to follow Daisy back out of the concert. I'm feeling pretty damn satisfied. I mean, this seems like a proportionate response, until I see the guy and his friends come tumbling out of the crowd right for us. I grab Daisy's hand and I pull her with me as I take off through the fairgrounds. These 5 guys are right behind us, and they're yelling, "Hold up, girls. We won't hurt you. Much." This was not the scenario I had pictured. The groping was supposed to be mutual and play out on the Ferris wheel. Instead, I'm engaged in a perverse game of tag where no one wins. The last thing I want is for these Neanderthals to follow us to our cars in the parking lot. And I have a feeling we're not going to get much sympathy by appealing to the carnival cops, if there were any there in the first place. So, no, it is on us to get out of this. I remember that line of trailers near the edge of the carnival. If we could lose the guys in the crowd by the rides, we should be able to duck behind them and hide out until the guys get bored and give up their chase. Daisy stays close as I lead us through the carnival grounds. As I'd hoped, the crowd is more dense when we reach the rides. There's a large line waiting for the Ferris wheel, and we plow right through it, then take a quick turn around the tilt-a-whirl. By the time the guys get through the masses, we have safely tucked ourselves behind an office trailer. It's hard to see much of what's happening in front of the trailer, at least not without poking our heads around the corner, and neither of us wants to do that. Instead, we collapse on the ground and try to catch our breath. By now, the moon has taken priority, and the dark night provides a welcome cover as we decide what to do next. I hated to admit it, but my mother was right. I couldn't explain it, but Lord, something was wrong about this place. You'd think a carnival would make people happy, but here, anger ran wild, and even Daisy and I felt it. Forget the guys. Forget the ghost hunting. Home is where we really, really wanted to be. Daisy's car is the closest, so we agree to walk to it together, and then she would drive me over to my own car on the other side of the lot. We follow the trailers along the perimeter of the carnival until we get to the far corner leading to the parking lot. We're quiet as we walk, both of us annoyed at the disappointing night and feeling edgy about possibly bumping into those handsy locals again. But the lot is blissfully populated only with cars. Everyone else is content to enjoy the tawdry thrills of a carnival that should never have happened. Daisy spots her car 3 rows ahead, but our relief doesn't last, and I find myself locked in place. Just beyond Daisy's car is a man. I don't have to ask if Daisy sees him. I can tell she does by the way she sucks in her breath. He's blurry and still, but one thing is very clear. He knows we're there. My brain begins to reel, trying desperately to reason out what the hell this guy is doing, so alone and so silent in the parking lot. Maybe it's car trouble, except he isn't standing near any car. He's just standing, and my heart plummets when it occurs to me that he's got to be waiting. I nudge Daisy and I whisper, "Fuck, I think it's one of the guys who was chasing us." She just shakes her head, and I can't tell if it's in disbelief or disagreement. I turn toward the figure again, and as I do, it raises its arm. The gesture could have meant anything, really. It could have been a greeting. It could have been an invitation. But even with the lack of words, I know in my core that this was a gesture indicating, just wait, there's more. And that's when I knew we're fucked. Daisy appears dazed, and I have to nudge her to make sure she hears me when I say, "Get to the car." All we have is 3 rows of cars. That's all we have to go. Yet somehow it seems miles away, especially when we see that the figure is moving forward toward us. We have enough of a lead to get to the car before it does, but it won't last. Not if Daisy can't dig her keys out of her purse in time. Daisy, get your keys. Get your fucking keys now. I'm in a full-on panic because for as even and slow as the figure is, it's also deliberate. There's an end goal here, I am sure of it. And it's gonna be us if Daisy can't get her shit together and get us in the goddamn car. The remaining rational part of my brain scans the ground for something, anything that I can use as a weapon. 5,000 illegal beer bottles were probably lining the walkways inside the carnival, yet here in the parking lot, I can't even find a fucking straw. Not that any of those things would do me any good, because when I look ahead of me, I see that the figure is now 2 cars away, and I'm pretty sure its feet weren't touching the ground. Just as I reach that grim understanding, the door lock clicks, and Daisy is yelling for me to get into the car. She guns the engine and maneuvers us out of that space as quick as she can without hitting anything. In books and in movies, you regularly hear people say, "Don't look back." And I suppose it makes sense. I mean, why relive something if you don't have to? Why see it again? The thing is, though, I didn't know what had just happened, and I didn't trust my eyes to see through my fear in the moment. So I need to know what's back there. And I look. I really hoped I wouldn't see anything, because that would make sense. Then I could just blame it on my imagination. But when I turn around, I see that same figure. It still looks like a man, sort of, and it had stopped, hovering right where our car had been. Daisy and I would talk about that night sometimes, wondering who or what it was that we saw in that parking lot. She was sure it was a ghost. And had I told my mother about that night, I'm guessing she would have agreed and said it was residual energy conjured up by all the anger in that crazy carnival. Me? I'm not sure. I can say that was the last event to be held on that lot for more than 2 decades. In doing a little bit of research for this story, I started doing some digging, and I found that this land was recently purchased for development by a very large corporation. I'm kind of curious to see what's going to come of it. Probably nothing, right? But I can tell you this much, I would never go back there. Cheers, y'all. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Unwritable Rant podcast. Head on over to theunwritablerant.com so that you can check out all of the back episodes of the show, or, if you're so inclined, buy me a drink. You'll find that little buy me a drink icon at the top of the page. Click on it and you'll be taken to a secure PayPal page where you can make a one-time donation to keep me in booze so that I can keep you in boozy stories. Now, if y'all will excuse me, I'm going to go find myself some fun out in the French Quarter. Hope y'all have a great week. I'll be back soon with more bourbon-soaked stories. Cheers, y'all.
Go to theunwritablerant.com and sign up to get early access to interviews and new videos. And don't forget to connect with Juliette on Twitter at Morning Neurosis.
Girl, you as pretty as a Sunday morning, standing on the corner at Carondelet. What you say we make our way up to Bourbon, couple hurricanes and a hand grenade, and get blown away. Let the chips fall where they may. If it's all the same, what you say, bon ton relay. Hey, pretty mama, I can smell the gumbo. Sweetest taste of honeysuckle on my lips. Good God Almighty, I can hear the trombone. Every heart ought to beat to a rhythm like this. Come a little closer, honey, let me hold you. Nothing tastes better than a bourbon kiss. You can be the flower on my magnolia. Every heart ought to beat to a rhythm